probably heard it said that chimps and humans have almost identical DNA. In fact, the number most people have heard is that chimps and humans are 98.4% genetically identical. Surely we evolved from a common ape ancestor. The 98% myth has been running around for decades, being used to sway honest people into believing the evolutionism myth. It blows me away that anti-creationists would use this argument, as even a junior high school student can refute it. Anybody can look up things on the internet and see for themselves the various lengths of genomes of organisms. Now, if you do this, you'll notice that the chimpanzee DNA is 12% longer than the human DNA. Wait a minute, 12% longer, but it's 98.4% identical? Does anybody else detect a math error here? But let's give them their 98.4% identical for a second. What does that mean? Let's give evolution the advantage and use the smaller of the two genomes. The human genome, which is a measly 3.2 billion base pairs long. 98.4% identical means it's 1.6% difference. Well, 1.6% of 3.2 billion is 51,200,000. This is how many changes there are between chimps and humans. As little as one change in the wrong place in your DNA is lethal. How, pray tell, do you expect to make tens of millions of changes without killing the organism? Short answer is, you can't. But let's assume that we are 98% identical to the chimp. So what? The differences between apes and humans are far, far beyond the physical and genetic. When was the last time you saw a chimpanzee doing calculus? Building and working on machines. Creating artwork. Making and playing musical instruments. Guerrilla warfare? This is all just as silly as a chimpanzee talking about technical genetics. Furthermore, it turns out the 98% myth got its start in the mid-1970s, long before actual DNA comparison could be made. This 98% figure was arrived at using a technique as known as reassociation kinetics. Basically, they'd take a strand of DNA, split it down the middle into RNA strands, then mix these strands between humans and chimps, and time how quickly or slowly the human and chimp strands joined together. The faster they joined, the more identical the strands were assumed to be. We now know this method is hugely unreliable, but yet the 98% figure now stuck, becoming a sort of gold standard to which all future studies tried to align. Today, after actual sequencing the human and chimpanzee DNA into their string of letters of A, T, C, and G, we can now do a letter-by-letter comparisons to see just how identical chimps and humans really are. And we've already shown how it's mathematically impossible to arrive at 98% identical, yet many studies allegedly come to this figure anyway. So how did they come up with this number? Well, the researchers start by removing huge portions of the DNA. Usually more than 98% of the DNA is ignored, and they focus on only the portions of the DNA that provide the code for building proteins. Of that less than 2%, they then very carefully select portions. For example, they will pick a gene that they know both chimps and humans have. Amazing! The single genes are almost identical. Well, no guff. The transmission of my 1986 chick magnet is the same transmission that was in the General Lee. This is because the chick magnet and the General Lee both had a common designer, Dodge Motor Vehicle Company. In like fashion, identical or near-identical genes in two organisms can be because of a common designer, not necessarily a common ancestor. But it gets even more scandalous when you dig into the technical details of the DNA comparisons. Let's lay out a chimp DNA and a human DNA strand beside each other. Well, first off, you only have 4 letters to choose from. That means you automatically have a 25% match. So suddenly, 98% isn't anywhere near as impressive, as even the evolutionists have alleged that you are at least 50% genetically identical to the banana. Even comparing the same genes, or different portions of the DNA, laying out the 2 strands side by side, the researchers will notice gaps in the alignments. Because evolution is assumed, then it is assumed that these gaps are insertions of information into, or deletions of information from, the DNA. They call these indels for short for insertions and deletions. These indels are ignored in the studies, basically removed. So the only differences documented are the actual letters, which are different. These indels might only be 1 or 2 letters long, or they could be tens of thousands of letters long. That's right! To allege a match between 2 strands of DNA, the researchers could remove completely huge chunks of DNA containing thousands of letters, and they don't count that as a difference between the 2 strands. Then there's the issue of orphan genes. These are genes that are only found in one specific organism. Chimpanzees have hundreds of them. Humans have hundreds of them. These orphan genes represent a 0% match between humans and chimps. These orphan genes are also ignored when comparing chimps and humans. Well, given all this latitude for what to include and exclude, it's not difficult to see how one can arrive at the mathematically impossible figure of 98% genetic similarity between chimps and humans. Given the same freedoms, I'm quite certain that you could also arrive at the conclusion that humans are 98% identical to the banana. Ugh. When one actually takes into account all of the DNA, the figure of matching chimp-human DNA rapidly drops down to as low as 70%, depending on how you do your comparisons. Remembering that the 0 point on our scale starts at 25%, not 0, you can start to grasp the difference. The differences between humans and chimps are great indeed, and the differences do not support common ancestry. The 98% myth is a downright scandalous myth. Don't let it make a monkey out of you. Chimps and humans are radically different, of which we are told in Genesis that only mankind was created in God's image. God didn't come in chimpanzee form to die for the chimpanzees. He came in human form to die in place of sinful humans like myself and you. He died in our place, then rose from the dead to show us he was the way to eternal life. That same person said that in order to obtain eternal life, you must be born again. Now, if he rose from the dead, then he obviously knows something we don't. I'd pay close attention to what he said and heed his warnings. Being born again is simply believing that Jesus rose from the dead, acknowledging that you've sinned, and asking him for forgiveness, and he will give you eternal life. Why don't you do that today?